Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly mundane and utterly unglamorous reality of medieval pigs, those snorting, mud-wallowing creatures that wandered through village streets and castle courtyards, living lives far less exciting than you'd expect. While fairy tales make them seem magical or menacing, the truth is, being a medieval pig was incredibly boring. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The barn door creaks open one morning, and suddenly you're face to face with something that can only be described as outside, a concept you'd heard rumors about but never quite believed. The world beyond that threshold is so aggressively bright that you immediately regret having eyes. It's like someone decided to weaponize sunshine and aim it directly at your newly functional retinas. You pause at the doorway, squinting like a suspicious detective examining a crime scene. The light isn't just bright, it's enthusiastic about being bright. It bounces off everything with the kind of cheerful persistence that makes you want to crawl back into the comfortable gloom of the barn and pretend the outside world is just an elaborate hoax. But your siblings are already tumbling past you with all the grace of dropped potatoes, squealing their way into this mysterious realm. So you follow, because peer pressure works even when your peers are other confused piglets who clearly don't know what they're doing either. The first thing you notice is that grass is nothing like hay. Hay is dead, civilized, predictable. Grass is alive under your feet, crunchy and tickly, and moving in ways that suggest it might have opinions about being stepped on. Each blade seems personally offended by your presence, poking back at your soft hooves with what feels like botanical passive aggression. You take a few experimental steps, and immediately understand why your mother never seemed particularly eager to venture outside. Walking on grass is like trying to navigate a carpet made of tiny green critics. Every step produces a different texture, a different sound, a different level of complaint from the vegetation beneath you. The other farm animals observe your grand entrance with the kind of riveted attention usually reserved for watching paint dry in slow motion. A cow regards you with eyes that hold all the enthusiasm of someone forced to watch their neighbor's vacation slides. A chicken pauses in its eternal quest to find something worth pecking at, gives you a look that suggests you're not it, and returns to its apparently fascinating patch of dirt. The goats don't even bother looking up. This might be the most devastating review of all. You're so unremarkable that goats, creatures known for finding entertainment in literally anything, can't be bothered to spare you a glance. You file this information away under things that sting more than they should, but then you spot it. A puddle. Not just any puddle, but what appears to be a small, perfect circle of water, sitting in the grass, like nature's own invitation to disaster. It gleams in the sunlight with the kind of innocent beauty that should immediately trigger every survival instinct you possess. Instead, it triggers your curiosity. You approach the puddle with all the caution of someone who has never encountered standing water before, which is exactly what you are. It looks harmless enough, just water, sitting there, being water. How complicated could it be? You lean down to investigate, your snout hovering inches above the surface. Your reflection stares back at you, distorted and somehow even more pig-like than you remember being. You tilt your head. Your reflection tilts back. This is either very advanced technology or magic, and either way, it deserves closer examination. You lean closer. The puddle, it turns out, has been waiting for this moment. As your snout touches the surface, you discover several things simultaneously. Water moves when you touch it, reflections disappear when disturbed, and most importantly, puddles are deeper than they look. Your front feet slip on the muddy edge, and suddenly you're not investigating the puddle so much as becoming one with it. You flail with all the dignity of a sack of potatoes falling downstairs, managing to splash yourself thoroughly while achieving absolutely nothing in terms of graceful recovery. You emerge from your impromptu bath, looking like someone dunked you in chocolate milk and forgot to towel you off. Water drips from your snout in a steady rhythm that sounds suspiciously like laughter. Mud clings to your pink skin with the tenacity of someone who's finally found where they belong. The other animals continue their studied indifference, though you swear the chicken might have paused slightly longer in its pecking. This is probably the pig equivalent of going viral, a moment of spectacular failure witnessed by an audience of creatures who will judge you silently for the rest of your natural life. You shake yourself off with as much dignity as someone covered in mud can muster, which is to say, none whatsoever. But here's the thing, the mud feels kind of nice. Cool, protective, like wearing a jacket made of earth. You look back at the puddle, no longer an enemy but a teacher, who delivered its lesson with the subtlety of a brick to the face. This is your introduction to the outside world. Bright, unpredictable, full of creatures who couldn't care less about your existence, and featuring hazards that look like opportunities right up until they don't. You waddle away from the puddle, muddier but arguably wiser, ready to discover what other delights await. A pig who thinks investigation is best conducted, snout first. The grass still feels weird under your feet, but now you know puddles are weirder. It's a start. Within approximately 37 minutes of your first outdoor adventure, you discover that pig society operates on what can only be described as organized chaos. There's a pecking order, except instead of pecking, there's mostly snorting and strategic shoving, which is somehow both more and less dignified than it sounds. You observe this social ballet from the sidelines initially, trying to decode the complex rules that govern who gets to eat first, who claims the prime mud real estate, and who has the authority to grunt disapprovingly at others. It's like watching a very low-stakes political drama where all the politicians are pink and covered in dirt. Your siblings have already begun establishing themselves in this hierarchy through a combination of size, volume, and sheer bloody-mindedness. The biggest piglet, who you privately nickname the Tank, simply walks through other pigs as if they're inconveniently placed obstacles. The smallest, Squeaky, compensates for lack of mass with an impressive capacity for indignation, expressing outrage at every perceived slight with the fervor of someone writing strongly worded letters to the universe. And then there's you, somewhere in the middle, not quite big enough to bulldoze your way through problems, not quite small enough to generate sympathy. You're adequately pig-shaped, which in the grand scheme of farmyard politics makes you thoroughly average. This is both disappointing and oddly comforting. You won't be ruling the roost, but you probably won't be anyone's primary target either. You learn the unspoken rules through careful observation and occasional painful experience. The best mud spots, those perfect combinations of depth, temperature, and strategic location, belong to the pigs who can defend them. This defense doesn't involve actual fighting so much as a complex series of postures, snorts, and the occasional strategic body block. Feeding time reveals the true complexity of pig politics. There's apparently an invisible map of the feeding trough, with certain sections belonging to certain pigs through some combination of tradition, intimidation, and what appears to be pure stubbornness. You try to claim a spot next to the middle, reasoning that it's neither too ambitious nor too humble. This turns out to be the territory of a pig you hadn't properly noticed before, not the biggest or the loudest, but possessing a quiet authority that becomes apparent the moment you attempt to eat from what is clearly their designated area. They don't push you away so much as simply exist more intensely in that space until you find yourself naturally drifting to a different section of the trough. It's a masterclass in assertiveness without aggression, and you file it away as a technique worth studying. This pig has achieved something you're beginning to recognize as valuable: respect, without having to constantly fight for it. The sleeping arrangements follow similar unspoken protocols. The warmest corner of the barn, closest to the heat source and furthest from drafts, is premium real estate, occupied by the most established pigs. You learn this through trial and error, attempting to claim a cozy spot, only to find yourself gradually squeezed out through a series of accidental repositionings by your neighbors. You eventually settle into a spot that's not the warmest, but isn't the coldest either. It's the pig equivalent of middle management, not prestigious but comfortable enough, and with a reasonable chance of promotion if someone above you in the hierarchy decides to relocate. But then comes the incident that establishes your place in the social order once and for all: the great stick conflict. You discover a particularly appealing stick, not special by any objective measure, just a stick that happens to be the right size and shape for reasons you can't quite articulate. It's aesthetically pleasing in the way that only sticks can be, with a satisfying heft and an interesting knot about halfway down its length. You're investigating this stick, considering its potential applications, when one of your siblings decides they want it. Not for any apparent reason. They hadn't shown any previous interest in sticks, and this one isn't notably different from dozens of others scattered around the farmyard. But now that you have it, they want it with the intensity of someone who's just discovered the last piece of pie. What follows is your first real territorial dispute, a careful dance of possession and challenge that plays out over several minutes. You hold your ground not because the stick is particularly valuable, but because backing down would establish you as someone who backs down. Your sibling tests your resolve through a series of increasingly obvious hints that they'd like you to abandon the stick voluntarily. You don't. They escalate to gentle nudging. You respond with strategic repositioning. They try the "I was here first" gambit, despite clear evidence to the contrary. You counter with the finders keepers defense, a legal principle that apparently exists even in pig society. Eventually, they give up and wander off to find their own stick, leaving you victorious in the most pointless battle in farmyard history. But it wasn't really about the stick. It was about establishing that you're not automatically the pig who gives up when challenged. You're the pig who will defend your claim to random pieces of wood with quiet determination. This small victory ripples through the social dynamics of your group. You're still not the biggest or the loudest, but you're now known as someone who can't be easily pushed around. It's a modest reputation, but in pig society, modest reputations are often the most sustainable ones. You keep the stick for 3 days before losing interest in it entirely. Your approach to cuisine can best be described as enthusiastically indiscriminate. Everything that fits in your mouth gets at least one audition for the role of food, and your mouth, it turns out, is more accommodating than you initially realized. This makes you either a dedicated culinary explorer or a walking disaster, depending on your perspective. The discovery process follows a simple methodology. See thing, taste thing, make decision about thing. It's not sophisticated, but it's thorough. Your quality control standards are essentially non-existent. If it doesn't immediately try to escape or fight back, it's fair game for investigation. Acorns become your first major culinary revelation. They fall from the oak tree near the fence with satisfying little thunks, like nature's way of providing snacks with built-in packaging. The first one you try is bitter and challenging, requiring significant chewing to break down into something your digestive system can process. But there's something appealing about the effort required. It feels like earning your meal through honest work. Soon you develop a sophisticated acorn evaluation system based on color, size, and the particular sound they make when you step on them. The best ones have a rich, nutty flavor that makes the bitter ones seem like practice rounds. You become something of an acorn connoisseur, though this is a distinction that impresses absolutely no one except yourself. Rocks, on the other hand, teach you about consequences. They look innocent enough, scattered around the farmyard like greyish snacks that someone forgot to make edible. Your first rock-tasting experience is educational in the way that touching hot stoves is educational, immediately instructive, and impossible to forget. Rocks, you learn, are not food. They're hard, flavourless, and possess an unfortunate tendency to click against your teeth in ways that make you question your life choices. Some are small enough to swallow accidentally, creating internal percussion that adds an unexpected soundtrack to your daily activities. Others are large enough to provide a workout for your jaw muscles that you neither requested nor enjoyed. After the third or fourth rock-related disappointment, you develop your first food identification rule. If it doesn't yield when you bite down, reconsider. This is basic wisdom, but you had to earn it through personal experience, because apparently you're the kind of pig who doesn't trust second-hand knowledge about rock edibility. Grass occupies the middle ground of your culinary spectrum. It's boring but reliable, like the food equivalent of a comfortable pair of shoes. There's always grass, it's always roughly the same flavor, and it never surprises you with unexpected textures or concerning aftertastes. When you're not sure what else to eat, grass provides a dependable baseline of nutrition and mild satisfaction. Different types of grass offer subtle variations on the theme. The short grass near the barn is tender, but not particularly flavorful. The longer grass in the far pasture requires more chewing but delivers more complexity. You begin to understand that grass is less a single food item and more a category containing dozens of variations, each with its own characteristics and seasonal availability. But then comes the apple incident, a moment that transforms your understanding of what food can be. You're conducting your usual morning patrol when you hear it, a soft thump from the direction of the apple tree. This is followed by another thump, and then another. Investigation reveals the source. Apples falling from the branches like gifts from pig heaven, each one landing with the promise of something extraordinary. Your first apple is a revelation. Sweet where acorns are bitter, soft where rocks are hard, flavorful where grass is plain. It's everything you didn't know you wanted from food, delivered in a convenient package that requires no special preparation or technique. You can simply pick it up and experience joy. The juice runs down your snout as you eat, sticky and impossibly sweet. The flesh yields perfectly to your teeth, offering just enough resistance to make the eating satisfying without requiring the effort of acorn consumption. Even the skin adds a pleasant tartness that balances the sweetness in ways that seem almost intentionally designed. You develop what can only be described as an apple addiction. Every morning begins with a pilgrimage to the apple tree, hoping to find new arrivals from the night before. You learn to recognize the sound of falling apples from impressive distances, abandoning whatever else you're doing to investigate. Other pigs begin to follow you on these apple quests, recognizing that you've somehow become the farmyard's unofficial apple detection specialist. Through this systematic approach to eating everything, you develop what might generously be called a sophisticated palate, though garbage disposal with feelings is probably more accurate. You can distinguish between different types of slop, identify edible plants by scent alone, and estimate the ripeness of fallen fruit through a combination of visual and tactile analysis. Your dining philosophy becomes comprehensive. Try everything once, remember what works, and never pass up an apple. It's not elegant, but it's effective. You're no longer just eating to survive. You're beginning to understand that food can be one of life's genuine pleasures, provided you're willing to sort through a few rocks to find the good stuff. The farmyard becomes your personal buffet, and you approach each meal with the enthusiasm of someone who's discovered that eating doesn't have to be just about nutrition. Sometimes, if you're lucky and the apple tree is feeling generous, it can be about joy. The farmyard reveals itself to be a geography of endless fascination once you begin paying attention to details. What initially appeared to be a simple collection of dirt, grass, and buildings transforms into a complex landscape with its own landmarks, territories, and hidden treasures. You approach this mapping project with the dedication of someone who plans to live here for a considerable time and wants to understand the neighborhood. Fence posts become your primary navigation system. Each one has its own character. Some lean slightly, others stand perfectly straight. A few bear interesting scars from encounters with farm equipment or weather. The corner post near the barn becomes home base, the starting point for most of your expeditions. The post by the gate serves as the official boundary between your world and the mysterious beyond. The wobbly post in the back section marks the entrance to what you privately consider the wilderness area, though it's really just a slightly overgrown corner where interesting weeds grow. These posts aren't just markers. They're scratching stations, shade providers, and reliable landmarks that help you understand where you are when everything else looks confusingly similar. You develop personal relationships with them, the way some people have favorite chairs. The post near the water trough becomes associated with refreshment, while the one by the compost pile represents opportunity and adventure. Mud holes transform from obstacles into destinations. Your initial encounter with the puddle taught you that water plus dirt equals unpredictability, but continued research reveals that not all mud holes are created equal. Some are shallow and warm, perfect for quick cooling on hot days. Others are deep and cool, providing serious temperature relief during the heat of summer. A few are more clay than mud, offering different textures and adhesive properties that serve various practical purposes. You begin to catalogue these mud holes like a connoisseur mapping wine regions. The big hole near the oak tree offers luxury wallowing, spacious, well-positioned for afternoon shade, and fed by drainage that keeps it consistently muddy, but not stagnant. The smaller holes scattered around the pasture serve as convenient cooling stations during your daily wanderings. Even the accidental puddles that form after rainstorms earn classification based on their temporary but sometimes superior mud quality. Weather education happens through direct experience and careful observation. Your first rainstorm teaches you that water falls from the sky with the same enthusiasm that apples fall from trees, but with much greater frequency and coverage. Rain transforms the entire farmyard, turning dust into mud, making grass slippery, and creating temporary rivers where none existed before. You learn to read the sky like a simplified meteorology textbook. Dark clouds mean interesting developments ahead. Grey clouds suggest gentle, steady rain that will improve mud quality without creating uncomfortable conditions. Clear skies indicate prime wallowing weather, when the sun will warm your mud holes to perfect temperatures. Different seasons bring different rules and opportunities. Spring means new grass, more insects to investigate, and mud holes that refresh themselves with greater frequency. Summer brings the luxury of warm nights and the challenge of finding adequate shade during the day. Autumn delivers the apple harvest and introduces you to the concept that weather can be both beautiful and uncomfortable simultaneously. Night sounds create an entirely different version of the farmyard. During the day, you navigate by sight and scent, with sound providing supplementary information, but darkness transforms sound into your primary information source, revealing a whole community of creatures who conduct their business while you sleep. You learn to distinguish between the sounds that matter and those that don't. The rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, interesting but not concerning. The distant lowing of cows, familiar and comforting. The sharp bark of the farm dog, worth paying attention to, as it usually indicates something unusual happening. The scurrying of rats near the feed storage, annoying but predictable. Owl calls become your nighttime soundtrack. A series of haunting notes that remind you the world continues operating even when you're not paying attention. You never see the owls, but their calls help you understand the passage of night hours and the approach of dawn. Through systematic exploration, you develop an internal map of your territory that includes not just physical features, but temporal patterns, seasonal changes, and the habits of other creatures who share your space. The farmyard stops being just the place where you live and becomes a complex, dynamic environment that you understand intimately. You realize that knowing your environment isn't just about survival. It's about belonging. This patch of dirt, these fence posts, these mud holes aren't just where you happen to be. They're home. And home, it turns out, is worth mapping carefully. Your body apparently receives a memo about adolescence that your brain never sees, because suddenly you're expanding in directions you didn't know existed. It's as if someone decided you needed more pig and started adding it randomly. A little extra width here, some additional length there. Height that arrives in unpredictable spurts that leave you feeling like you're wearing someone else's body. The transformation happens gradually at first, then all at once, like a slow-motion explosion of pigness. Your legs, which had finally figured out how to work together in a reasonably coordinated fashion, suddenly find themselves attached to a body that's operating under entirely new physics. What used to be a straightforward walk from point A to point B becomes an exercise in controlled falling, with occasional successful navigation thrown in to keep things interesting. You develop what can only be described as a personal relationship with gravity, where once you move through space with something approaching grace, or at least predictability, you now careen through your daily activities like a pink wrecking ball with legs and opinions. Simple tasks become complex engineering problems. Walking through a gate requires spatial calculations that your brain isn't equipped to handle. Navigating around other pigs becomes a diplomatic crisis, involving momentum, trajectory, and frequent apologies expressed through apologetic grunting. Your reflection in the water trough becomes a source of daily surprise. Each morning brings new evidence that your body has been conducting unauthorized renovations overnight. Your snout seems longer, your ears appear to have repositioned themselves, and your overall pig shape expands in ways that seem both inevitable and somehow personally insulting. The voice changes arrive with the subtlety of a brass band. Your previously reliable squeaks, adequate for basic communication and expressing simple emotions, transform into something that sounds like someone learning to operate farm machinery. High-pitched protests become full-throated snorts that surprise you with their volume and authority. You attempt a simple expression of mild annoyance and produce a sound that causes other pigs to look around for the source of what they clearly assume is heavy equipment. These new vocal capabilities come with unexpected social implications. Your opinions, previously communicated through squeaks that could be easily ignored, now carry weight proportional to their volume. When you express disapproval about the morning slop distribution, other pigs actually listen. This is both thrilling and terrifying. Suddenly you have the voice to back up your positions, whether or not you've thought them through properly. But perhaps most surprising is the discovery that you're getting stronger, whether you want to or not. Your casual push against a fence post that used to require effort now moves things in ways that suggest your strength has been upgraded without your permission. You lean against the barn wall for a comfortable scratch and hear concerning creaking sounds. Your playful shove against a sibling during a disagreement about optimal mud-hole positioning produces results that seem disproportionate to your intentions. This new strength feels like borrowing power tools from someone who forgot to include the instruction manual. You have capabilities you don't fully understand and weren't entirely prepared for. Simple actions require recalibration. What used to be a gentle nudge now registers as a statement of intent. Your body has apparently decided you're ready for responsibilities you're not sure you want. The awkwardness extends beyond just physical coordination into a more fundamental uncertainty about how much space you occupy and how much force you generate. You bump into things that used to be safely outside your personal radius. You knock over water containers through what you swear was careful movement. You accidentally intimidate smaller pigs simply by existing near them with your new, improved pig presence. It's like living in a body that someone else assembled using a manual written in a different language. Everything works, technically, but nothing feels quite right. You're constantly discovering new aspects of your physicality: longer reach, different center of gravity, vocal range that extends into frequencies you didn't know you possessed. The most frustrating part is that this transformation seems to follow no logical timeline. Some days you wake up noticeably larger than the day before. Other days, your body apparently takes a break from growing to focus on reconfiguring what it's already built. Your proportions shift like someone's adjusting the settings on a pig-shaped machine, trying to find the optimal configuration through trial and error. You begin to understand that adolescence isn't just about getting bigger. It's about becoming a different version of yourself while still being expected to function as the old version. Your body is writing checks that your coordination can't cash, and every day brings new evidence that growing up is less a gradual process and more a series of controlled crashes into adulthood. The Great Fence investigation begins with what seems like a reasonable question: what's on the other side? This curiosity, combined with your newly upgraded strength and a brain still operating on piglet-sized logic, creates the perfect conditions for your first real engineering challenge. The fact that you're attempting to solve this challenge with cognitive equipment roughly equivalent to a walnut doesn't deter you. It just makes the project more interesting. You've been observing the fence for weeks now, studying its construction with the focused attention of someone who has all day and limited entertainment options. It's made of boards, obviously, held together with nails and what appears to be stubborn determination. The boards have gaps between them, not quite large enough for a pig of your current dimensions, but possibly large enough for a pig of your previous dimensions, which you still occasionally think you are. The fence stands there every day, smugly vertical, keeping you from exploring what you're increasingly convinced must be paradise on the other side. After all, why would humans build a fence unless they were trying to keep you away from something wonderful? It's basic logic, the kind of ironclad reasoning that seems brilliant right up until it collides with reality. Your first approach involves what you generously call reconnaissance, but what observers might describe as staring intensely at fence boards while breathing heavily. You walk the perimeter, examining each section for weaknesses, loose boards, or what engineers might call structural vulnerabilities, and you call, "Maybe I can push this part." The corner section near the big oak tree shows promise. One board sits slightly lower than the others, creating a gap that suggests possibility. You test it with your snout, applying gentle pressure to assess its give. The board flexes slightly, which you interpret as an invitation to apply more pressure. Engineering principles suggest that if a little pressure creates a little movement, more pressure will create more movement. This is the kind of logic that has probably gotten countless pigs into trouble throughout history. You back up a few steps, lower your head, and charge. The board, it turns out, was not as loose as your reconnaissance suggested. Your impact produces a satisfying thunk and absolutely no structural damage to the fence. The only thing that moves is you, backward, with the kind of sudden acceleration that suggests the fence has opinions about your engineering project. This setback only reinforces your conviction that the fence requires a more sophisticated approach. You spend the afternoon developing what you consider advanced tactics, testing different angles of approach, attempting to squeeze through gaps that are optimistically too small, and experimenting with climbing techniques that would challenge a more naturally equipped creature. The breakthrough comes when you discover that one particular board near the gate actually is loose, not dramatically loose, just enough to create a gap that might accommodate a determined pig willing to reconsider the traditional relationship between pig shape and fence gap shape. You work at it patiently, using your snout as a lever and your new strength as motivation. And then, miracle of miracles, you're through. The other side of the fence turns out to be exactly like your side of the fence, except positioned inconveniently beyond the fence. There's grass, which you have. There are weeds, which you also have. There's dirt, which exists in abundant supply on your side as well. The only notable difference is that this grass hasn't been systematically investigated by you, which makes it technically more interesting, but not necessarily better. You're contemplating this philosophical disappointment when you brush against what looks like perfectly ordinary fence wire. The electric fence teaches you about consequences with the subtlety of a lightning bolt and the educational impact of someone slapping you with a live fish. The shock runs through your body like an announcement that you've made a serious error in judgment, delivered in a language consisting entirely of exclamation points and regret. You leap backward with a grace that your normal coordination couldn't achieve, landing in an undignified heap that somehow feels more dignified than whatever just happened to you. The wire looks innocent, just hanging there between posts, like it hasn't just introduced you to a new category of unpleasant experiences. This is your introduction to the concept that humans have backup plans for their backup plans, and that some barriers are designed not to keep you in, but to educate you about why you should want to stay in. The electric fence doesn't prevent escape so much as make escape seem like a poor life choice. You retreat through your carefully engineered gap with considerably less enthusiasm than you'd shown going the other direction, and spend the rest of the day reconsidering your position on fence-related adventures. The dawn breaks over the farmyard the next morning with the kind of peaceful beauty that makes yesterday's fence investigation seem like a fever dream. Dew catches on spiderwebs stretched between fence posts, transforming them into intricate jewelry that sparkles in the early light. The air carries the fresh scent of morning, grass releasing moisture, earth warming slowly, the distant promise of breakfast slop being prepared. You watch the sunrise from your side of the fence, appreciating the view with the enhanced perspective of someone who has tested the alternatives and found them wanting. The farmyard, you realize, might not be a prison so much as a carefully curated environment designed to provide everything a reasonable pig might need without the inconvenient addition of electric surprises. The poetry of morning slop becomes apparent as you join the breakfast queue. The satisfying slop of food hitting trough, the communal gathering of pigs united in purpose, the simple pleasure of eating something that doesn't fight back. Your fence investigation has given you a new appreciation for the predictable pleasures of contained life. You file the electric fence experience under lessons learned the hard way and develop a new relationship with boundaries, not as challenges to overcome, but as useful information about where the pleasant experiences end and the educational ones begin. The social landscape of pig society becomes significantly more complex as you grow, like someone upgraded your basic social software to a version with more features, but forgot to include a user manual. Alliances that seemed permanent during your piglet days now form and dissolve with the unpredictability of mud puddles in changing weather, reliable when conditions are stable, but completely transformed by the smallest shift in circumstances. You discover that you have opinions about things, and more surprisingly, that these opinions are strong, specific, and apparently non-negotiable. This comes as news to you, since you don't remember deciding to have passionate views about optimal mud consistency or the proper protocol for approaching the feed trough. But there they are, fully formed pig-based opinions that arrive with the conviction of someone who's spent years thinking about these issues, even though you're pretty sure you just started having thoughts more complex than food good, cold bad. Your opinion about the morning feeding order, for instance, emerges fully developed and immovable. Pigs should approach from the left side of the trough, maintain reasonable spacing, and avoid the kind of aggressive jostling that creates chaos for everyone. This seems obvious and rational to you. Other pigs, it turns out, have equally strong and completely contradictory opinions about the same process. The resulting negotiations require diplomatic skills you don't remember developing. You find yourself engaged in complex social strategies involving timing, positioning, and the kind of strategic grunting that constitutes pig politics. Some days you win these negotiations through persistence. Other days you lose them through miscalculating either your own leverage or the depth of other pigs' commitment to their positions. Your relationship with your siblings shifts from the straightforward dynamics of who's bigger to the more nuanced question of who's more strategically minded. Pure size matters less than understanding how to use size effectively. The pig who wins disputes isn't necessarily the largest one, but the one who best understands when to assert themselves and when to conserve energy for more important battles. But the real shift in social dynamics comes when you begin to interact with the broader farm hierarchy, beyond just other pigs. This introduces you to a complex ecosystem of species relationships that operate according to rules you never knew existed and aren't entirely sure you understand even after experiencing them. The chickens, for instance, judge you. Not openly. They're too sophisticated for obvious displays of disapproval, but with the kind of subtle, persistent criticism that makes you aware you're being evaluated and found somehow inadequate. They observe your daily activities with the detached interest of critics reviewing a performance they didn't choose to attend. When you knock over their water container during an enthusiastic mud-wallowing session, they don't express anger so much as resigned disappointment, as if this confirms their existing low expectations for pig behavior. Their judgment feels particularly unfair because chickens spend their days engaged in what appears to be frantic, purposeless pecking at things that may or may not be food. This seems like questionable behavior from creatures positioning themselves as arbiters of farmyard propriety. But their disapproval carries weight anyway, adding a layer of social pressure to activities that used to be purely personal. The goats represent a different challenge entirely. They ignore you with the kind of professional indifference that suggests you're not interesting enough to merit even basic acknowledgement. This hurts more than chicken judgment, because at least judgment implies you're worth forming an opinion about. Goat indifference suggests you're so unremarkable that developing an opinion would be wasted effort. You attempt to win goat approval through various strategies: impressive mud-wallowing displays, strategic positioning near their favorite climbing areas, even experimental approaches to their preferred weeds. The goats observe these efforts with the same blank expression they use for watching grass grow, processing your bid for attention and filing it under "not worth responding to." The cows exist in what appears to be an entirely different reality. They acknowledge your presence, the way humans might acknowledge weather, as a fact of existence that doesn't require particular reaction or adjustment. Cow-pig relations operate on such a fundamentally different scale that meaningful interaction seems impossible. They're living in a bovine world where pig concerns register somewhere between irrelevant and undetectable. This multi-species social environment teaches you that farmyard politics involve much more than just pig hierarchy. You're a minor player in a complex ecosystem where chickens hold moral authority, goats control access to the most interesting climbing opportunities, and cows define the baseline of calm indifference that everyone else measures themselves against. You begin to understand that your pig problems are specifically pig problems. Other species don't share your concerns about mud quality or feeding order because they're dealing with entirely different priorities. The chickens worry about things that require pecking. The goats focus on climbing and vegetation evaluation. The cows contemplate whatever cows contemplate, which seems to involve a lot of standing and occasional thoughtful chewing. This broader perspective is both humbling and liberating. Your pig disputes matter intensely within pig society but register as minor background noise in the larger farmyard community. You're simultaneously the center of your own social universe and a peripheral character in everyone else's story. Learning to navigate these multiple social layers while maintaining your pig identity becomes your primary developmental challenge. Being authentically pig while respecting the complex web of relationships that make farmyard life possible. Autumn arrives like nature's way of apologizing for summer's heat, bringing with it the single most important development in your young life. Apples fall more frequently. This isn't just a minor improvement in your daily routine, it's a fundamental upgrade to existence itself, transforming each morning from a simple search for adequate food into a treasure hunt, where the treasure is both delicious and regularly replenished. You develop an almost mystical connection to the apple tree's productivity cycles. Windy nights become occasions for barely contained excitement, because wind plus gravity equals apple distribution on a scale that can only be described as magical. You learn to read weather patterns not for agricultural purposes, but for their apple delivery implications. A skill that serves no practical purpose beyond maximizing fruit acquisition but feels incredibly important nonetheless. The abundance forces you to make sophisticated decisions about apple quality and consumption strategy. Do you eat the fresh fallen apples immediately, or cache some for later? How do you balance the desire for perfectly ripe fruit against the risk that other pigs will discover your preferred apple collection areas? These questions require the kind of strategic thinking that would challenge economists, except you're solving them with a pig brain driven primarily by apple enthusiasm. Winter preparation becomes your introduction to the concept of seasonal planning, though your approach is more intuitive than methodical. Your body apparently receives seasonal memos that your conscious mind never sees, because you find yourself eating more and moving less without making any deliberate decision to do so. It's as if someone installed autumn software in your pig operating system, automatically adjusting your behavior for optimal winter survival. The eating increase feels less like hunger and more like preparation for some future challenge you don't fully understand. Food becomes not just daily sustenance but investment in unknown future needs. You consume with the dedication of someone saving money, except instead of accumulating wealth, you're accumulating what can best be described as pig reserves, layers of insulation that seem like a good idea even though you're not entirely sure why. The movement reduction happens gradually, like someone slowly turning down the volume on your activity level. Daily explorations become shorter, enthusiasm for fence investigation diminishes. Even your mud-wallowing sessions become more about temperature regulation and less about recreational rolling. You're conserving energy for reasons that seem important, even though you can't articulate what those reasons might be. Your first encounter with the concept of cold versus pleasantly not hot provides important meteorological education. Cold, you discover, is not simply the absence of heat, but an active presence that affects every aspect of pig life. It changes the texture of mud, makes water less appealing for casual splashing, and transforms morning grass into something that crunches under your feet in ways that suggest the earth itself has changed its basic properties. But then comes your first snowfall, which introduces you to precipitation that's somehow both more and less than rain. You watch the white stuff falling from the sky with the fascination of someone witnessing weather that doesn't quite make sense. It's cold, which is like rain, but silent, which is unlike rain, and accumulates in ways that transform familiar landscapes into something that looks like the farmyard's more attractive cousin. Your initial response is confusion. This doesn't fit any of your existing weather categories. Then comes joy, as you discover that snow provides excellent entertainment through its willingness to be pushed around, jumped on, and generally manipulated in ways that ordinary weather doesn't allow. You can actually play with this precipitation, treating it like naturally occurring recreational material that falls from the sky for your personal amusement. But the joy transforms into practical understanding, as you realize that snow is essentially cold mud that fell from above, instead of forming naturally on the ground. This revelation connects your existing mud expertise to this new weather phenomenon, creating what feels like advanced environmental knowledge. Snow becomes less mysterious weather, and more like a seasonal variation on familiar farmyard materials. By the end of your first winter, you've developed a seasonal awareness that extends beyond just recognizing weather changes to understanding their implications for optimal pig living. You know when to expect abundant apples, how to prepare for cold weather, and why snow is both entertaining and essentially just atmospheric mud delivery. This knowledge makes you feel like someone who belongs in this environment, rather than someone who just happens to live here. Your cognitive abilities develop through what can charitably be called hands-on learning. Though since you lack hands, it's more accurate to describe it as snout-on, full-body commitment learning. The process involves encountering problems, applying pig logic to their solution, and discovering through trial and error which approaches work, and which result in educational but uncomfortable consequences. The latch discovery happens completely by accident, which you later claim as evidence of strategic thinking, because admitting to accidental intelligence seems more impressive than acknowledging you solved a complex problem by falling against a gate repeatedly. You're leaning against the gatepost for a comfortable scratch when your shifting weight creates pressure against the metal latch mechanism in exactly the right way to lift it free from its catch. The gate swings open with the casual ease of something that was never really as secure as everyone assumed. You stare at the opening with the satisfaction of someone who has just conquered advanced engineering, even though your success resulted from what was essentially controlled stumbling. But outcomes matter more than methods. And the outcome is clear. You have just gained access to a previously restricted area through the application of pig-based problem-solving. This discovery leads to systematic experimentation with other mechanical devices around the farmyard. Most latches, you learn, are designed to prevent access by creatures operating under the assumption that opposable thumbs are required for mechanical manipulation. But pig snouts, combined with strategic body positioning and sufficient determination, can substitute for thumbs in many applications. Your success rate with latch manipulation hovers around 30%, which is high enough to be useful, but low enough to maintain the element of surprise. You develop a reputation as the pig who sometimes can and sometimes can't open things, which creates just enough unpredictability to keep humans slightly concerned about your mechanical aptitude. The water trough incident represents the intersection of engineering enthusiasm and incomplete understanding of hydraulic principles. You observe that the trough's water level decreases throughout the day as pigs drink from it, and you hypothesize that you can improve this system through what you consider design optimization. Your solution involves repositioning several large rocks to create what you envision as a more efficient water distribution system. The engineering theory seems sound. Rocks will create small pools and channels that direct water flow more effectively. What you fail to account for is that moving large rocks requires more precision than pig coordination typically provides. The result is a water system that technically functions but creates exciting new splash patterns that spray water in directions the original designers never intended. Some of this water reaches areas that benefit from additional moisture. Some of it creates new mud holes in previously dry locations. Most of it ends up places where water wasn't supposed to be, creating what engineers would call unintended consequences, and you prefer to think of as enhanced environmental complexity. But your greatest achievement in practical problem-solving involves training humans to respond to strategic communication. You discover that humans can be conditioned to provide food through the application of specific vocalizations delivered at optimal timing and volume. This represents your first successful interspecies manipulation project. The process requires careful observation of human behavioral patterns, identification of decision-making moments, and the development of persuasive techniques that work across species barriers. You learn that humans respond differently to various types of pig communication. Some are motivated by pitiful whining, others by assertive demanding, and a few by what appears to be charming conversational grunting. Your first successful manipulation involves convincing a human to provide an extra apple through what you consider sophisticated psychological pressure, but what observers might describe as persistent, pathetic whining delivered at exactly the right moment. The human caves to your demands, providing the desired apple while muttering what sounds like commentary about pig intelligence and their own decision-making abilities. Success fills you with pride, mixed with mild shame. Pride, because you've successfully influenced a creature significantly larger and theoretically more intelligent than yourself. Shame, because your method relied heavily on exploiting human sympathy rather than demonstrating genuine need. This experience teaches you that problem-solving often involves understanding psychology as much as mechanics, and that the most effective solutions sometimes require working with other creatures' motivations rather than against their systems. You file this knowledge under advanced pig skills and begin looking for opportunities to apply these principles to other challenges. The process of claiming your corner of the pig universe begins with a slow realization that you need a corner to claim. This understanding arrives gradually, like dawn breaking over your consciousness, as you recognize that wandering aimlessly around the farmyard no longer feels satisfying. You need a base of operations, a headquarters for your pig activities, a place that's unmistakably yours in a world where most things belong to humans, or the larger, more established pigs who got there first. Your territorial assessment starts with careful observation of the real estate market in pig society. The premium locations are already occupied by pigs who've achieved what can only be described as farmyard tenure. They've been here long enough to establish squatters' rights through sheer persistence and strategic placement. The corner by the feed trough belongs to old Bessie, a pig of impressive dimensions and unwavering conviction about her property rights. The shaded area under the big oak tree is controlled by a coalition of medium-sized pigs who formed what appears to be a time-sharing agreement based on principles you don't fully understand. This leaves you with what real estate agents would diplomatically call emerging neighborhoods, areas with potential that require vision and possibly some lowered expectations. You survey the available options with the careful attention of someone shopping for their first apartment on a limited budget. There's a promising spot near the fence that gets good morning sun but suffers from drainage issues. Another area offers excellent privacy but limited access to foot traffic, which matters when your social life depends on other pigs wandering past your territory. Eventually, you settle on a modest but well-positioned plot near the water trough, close enough to the action to stay connected with farmyard society, far enough from the premium real estate to avoid territorial disputes with pigs who've earned their positions through years of strategic positioning and accumulated bulk. It's not glamorous, but it's yours, and ownership feels surprisingly important even when you're not entirely sure what you plan to do with it. The mud-wallow negotiations represent your introduction to farmyard real estate law, which operates on principles that would challenge international diplomats. The existing wallow system has evolved over years through a complex combination of tradition, convenience, and the kind of unspoken agreements that develop when multiple parties need to share limited resources without killing each other. Your territory includes access to a decent-sized wallow that you share with two other pigs through what can only be described as diplomatic rotation. Morning wallowing rights belong to Gertie, a pig whose seniority gives her first claim on optimal mud conditions. Afternoon access falls to you, which works well since the sun has warmed the mud to perfect temperature by then. Evening wallowing goes to Chester, who prefers his mud slightly cooler and doesn't mind the reduced privacy that comes with end-of-day farmyard traffic. This arrangement requires delicate negotiations that happen entirely through subtle communication, meaningful looks, strategic positioning, and the occasional pointed grunt that suggests someone might be overstaying their allotted mud time. You learn to read the signs that indicate when your wallow partners are ready to transition, and more importantly, when they're not quite ready but could be convinced with the right diplomatic pressure. Learning when to fight and when to relocate becomes one of your most valuable life skills. Some territorial disputes are worth defending. Challenges to your core living space, attempts to redirect your water access, or encroachment on your prime feeding positions. These violations require responses that demonstrate your commitment to maintaining your established boundaries without escalating to conflicts that could damage your broader social relationships. But other disputes fall into the category of not worth the energy expenditure. When a larger pig decides they want to investigate your afternoon sunbasking spot, relocation often proves more practical than confrontation. When weather conditions make your usual mud wallow less appealing, and other pigs start eyeing it with interest, sometimes the strategic choice involves finding alternative, wallowing arrangements rather than defending suboptimal real estate. This decision-making process requires constant assessment of the cost-benefit ratio of territorial defense. How much does this particular patch of dirt matter to your overall quality of life? How much effort would successful defense require? Are there acceptable alternatives available? Would winning this fight create problems that outweigh the benefits of victory? These calculations happen quickly, often while standing nose to nose with another pig who's conducting similar strategic analysis. Your reflection in the water trough continues to surprise you on a daily basis, though the nature of the surprise evolves as you settle into your adult pig dimensions. Where once you were startled by the rapid changes in your appearance, now you're amazed by the pig looking back at you, not because it's unfamiliar, but because it looks like someone who belongs here. The pig in the reflection has the confident posture of someone who owns territory, the calm expression of someone who's figured out how farmyard society works, and the slight smugness of someone who's successfully established themselves in a competitive environment. Sometimes you catch yourself staring at this reflection with something approaching satisfaction. You've become the pig you were apparently meant to be, not the biggest or the most impressive, but competent, established, and reasonably successful by pig standards. The surprise now comes from recognizing yourself as someone who's achieved what you didn't even know you were trying to achieve. A place in the world that feels both earned and sustainable. Your territory, modest though it may be, represents more than just physical space. It's evidence that you've successfully navigated the transition from confused piglet to functional adult pig, complete with property rights, social standing, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing where you belong. Foraging evolves from desperate scavenging to what can only be described as an art form, complete with sophisticated techniques, advanced methodology, and the kind of nuanced understanding that comes from treating food discovery as both survival skill and intellectual pursuit. You develop what amounts to a PhD in finding food, earned through years of field research and practical application of principles that would impress agricultural scientists if they bothered to study pig methodology. Your approach to foraging becomes systematic rather than opportunistic. Where once you investigated anything that might possibly be edible, now you conduct targeted searches based on seasonal availability, weather patterns, and the behavioral habits of other farmyard creatures. You know which areas produce the best acorns during autumn, where humans are most likely to drop interesting food items, and how to read the subtle signs that indicate when fallen apples are approaching peak ripeness. Root detection through soil analysis represents your most advanced technical skill. Your snout develops into a precision instrument capable of identifying underground food sources through what appears to be a combination of scent analysis, soil texture assessment, and possibly some form of pig intuition that scientists haven't discovered yet. You can distinguish between different types of roots based on the way they affect soil consistency, moisture patterns, and the particular way earth feels when disturbed by underground growth. The process involves careful investigation of suspicious ground areas, places where the soil feels different under your feet, where vegetation grows in patterns that suggest interesting underground activity, or where other creatures have shown previous interest in digging. You've learned to read these signs like a geological survey, identifying promising excavation sites with accuracy that suggests either genuine skill or incredibly sophisticated guessing. Your digging technique evolves from enthusiastic but inefficient earth-moving to strategic excavation that conserves energy while maximizing results. You learn to angle your approach based on root direction, to recognize when you're getting close to your target through changes in soil scent and texture, and to distinguish between routes worth the digging effort and those that represent poor return on energy investment. But perhaps your greatest achievement in skill mastery is discovering the zen of wallowing, that perfect intersection of temperature, depth, and mud consistency that transforms a simple cooling activity into something approaching transcendence. This isn't just about getting muddy anymore. It's about achieving optimal comfort through precise environmental manipulation. You develop what amounts to a personal mud philosophy based on careful observation of how different conditions affect your wallowing experience. The best mud achieves a delicate balance. Wet enough to provide cooling and coating properties, but not so wet that it fails to stick properly. Deep enough to provide full body coverage, but not so deep that movement becomes difficult. Warm enough to be pleasant, but not so warm that it fails to provide temperature relief. Creating these optimal conditions requires understanding weather patterns, water sources, and soil composition. You learn to predict when morning dew will provide the perfect moisture addition to yesterday's wallow, when afternoon rain will improve or ruin mud consistency, and how to adjust your wallowing schedule to take advantage of natural temperature variations throughout the day. The process becomes meditative, a careful ritual of testing, adjusting, and fine-tuning that produces both physical comfort and something approaching mental peace. Your ideal wallow represents the intersection of practical necessity and personal satisfaction, a daily achievement that proves you've mastered at least one aspect of pig life to a degree that approaches perfection. Weather prediction through joint aches and atmospheric pressure changes emerges as an unexpected but valuable skill. Your body apparently comes equipped with meteorological equipment that operates without your conscious control, providing advance warning of weather changes through various forms of physical feedback that you learn to interpret as forecast information. Your joints begin commenting on atmospheric pressure changes roughly 12 hours before weather shifts become obvious to less sensitive creatures. A subtle stiffness in your left front leg suggests rain within the next day. Generalized achiness indicates more significant weather system approaches. The particular way your right hip feels when you first stand up in the morning provides surprisingly accurate information about wind patterns and temperature changes. This biological weather station proves useful for planning daily activities. Knowing that rain is approaching allows you to schedule optimal wallowing time for just before the precipitation arrives. Understanding that temperature drops are coming helps you identify the best sunny spots for afternoon napping. Recognizing that wind patterns are shifting gives you advance notice to secure any small items you've collected that might blow away. You develop a reputation among other pigs as someone who seems to know when weather is about to change, though you can't really explain how you know beyond pointing to various joints and saying, "This one feels funny." Other pigs begin watching your behavior for weather cues, turning you into an unwilling meteorologist whose predictions are based on internal sensations rather than scientific instruments. The accuracy of your biological weather forecasting hovers around 70%, which is high enough to be useful but low enough to maintain some humility about your abilities. You're not infallible, but you're better than random guessing. And in farmyard society, being better than random at anything constitutes a valuable skill worth developing. These various masteries, foraging, root detection, optimal wallowing, and weather prediction, combine to create what amounts to advanced pig competency. You've moved beyond basic survival into sophisticated environmental management, developing specialized skills that make your daily life not just sustainable, but genuinely comfortable. The satisfaction of mastery extends beyond just practical benefits. There's pride in knowing you've become genuinely good at pig activities, that your years of experimentation and learning have produced expertise that other pigs recognize and respect. You've found your niche in the farmyard ecosystem not through size or aggression, but through developing skills that make you valuable as both collaborator and resource. You've become the pig that other pigs consult when they need advice about where to find the best routes, when the weather is likely to change, or how to achieve optimal wallowing conditions. This expertise represents your successful transition from pig who survives to pig who thrives. The arrival of new piglets transforms your social status in ways you didn't anticipate and aren't entirely prepared for. Suddenly, you're no longer the new pig, trying to figure out how things work. You're the experienced pig that newer, smaller, more confused pigs look to for guidance. This promotion happens automatically, without application or interview process, based solely on the fact that you've been here longer and managed not to die or get kicked out. Your first encounter with this new responsibility involves a particularly confused piglet who somehow gets the impression that you know what you're doing. They follow you around the farmyard with the dedication of someone who's decided you represent wisdom and competence, despite clear evidence that you're still figuring things out yourself. Their unwavering faith in your expertise is both flattering and terrifying. You're being treated as an authority on pig life when you still feel like you're improvising most of your daily decisions. Mentoring the next generation becomes a reluctant responsibility that you accept with all the enthusiasm of someone volunteering for extra work. Teaching piglets basic farmyard survival turns out to be like herding cats. If cats were muddy and had strong opinions about everything you tried to tell them, they ask questions you can't answer, ignore advice that could save them from painful learning experiences, and somehow manage to find new ways to get into trouble that you never imagined possible. Your first student decides that your carefully explained mud-wallow safety procedures are suggestions rather than requirements, leading to a rescue operation that involves pulling a thoroughly stuck piglet out of mud that was clearly too deep for their experience level. Your second student listens attentively to your lecture about electric fence identification and then immediately touches the electric fence to see what happens. Your third student nods seriously during your presentation about optimal foraging locations and then spends the afternoon trying to eat rocks. The frustration of watching young pigs make the same mistakes you made, despite your attempts to share hard-won wisdom, teaches you something about the nature of experience. Some knowledge apparently can't be transferred through explanation. It has to be earned through personal contact with consequences. Your role as mentor becomes less about preventing mistakes and more about being available to help pick up the pieces when inevitable disasters occur. But there's unexpected satisfaction in the moments when your guidance actually works. When a piglet successfully applies your mud consistency advice to create their first decent wallow, or when your warning about human feeding schedules helps them position themselves for optimal food access, you feel something that might be described as pride. You're contributing to the education of the next generation of pigs, passing on knowledge that makes their lives easier and safer. The responsibility of being experienced weighs more heavily than you expected when you still feel like you're making most of it up as you go along. Other pigs defer to your judgment on questions about everything, from optimal sleeping positions to the social implications of feed trough politics. They assume you know things that you learned through lucky guessing and accidental success, treating your opinions as if they're based on deep understanding rather than educated improvisation. This false expertise creates its own pressure. You find yourself researching topics more thoroughly before offering opinions, not because you're naturally studious, but because other pigs actually listen to what you say now. Your casual observations about weather patterns or food quality carry weight that your previous squeaking never possessed. You're held to standards of reliability that you never agreed to meet, but somehow find yourself trying to live up to anyway. The transformation from follower to leader happens so gradually that you barely notice it until you're in the middle of resolving a dispute between two piglets over access to a particularly appealing mud puddle. Somehow, you've become the pig that other pigs turn to for conflict resolution. Despite having no formal training in diplomacy and a personal conflict resolution style that relies heavily on strategic grunting and appeals to common sense, your social standing stabilizes at what might be called respected middle management. Not the top pig in farmyard hierarchy, but definitely not the bottom. You're consulted on important decisions, your opinions are considered worth hearing, and you have enough influence to affect outcomes without bearing full responsibility for consequences. It's a comfortable position that provides authority without overwhelming pressure, respect without impossible expectations. The realization that you've achieved actual social standing, that you matter in pig society and contribute value beyond just taking up space, brings a satisfaction you didn't know you were seeking. You found your place not through dominance or special talent, but through the simple process of sticking around long enough to accumulate wisdom and being willing to share it with whoever needs it. The weight of responsibility settles on your shoulders, like a blanket you didn't realize you needed until it arrived. Your first real duty involves guarding territory during feeding time, which sounds straightforward until you discover that guarding requires a complex understanding of farmyard politics, threat assessment, and the subtle art of deterrence without escalation. Your territory includes not just your personal living space, but also your established feeding position at the trough, a spot you've claimed through months of strategic positioning and gentle persistence. Defending this position means more than just standing in it. You need to project ownership through posture, timing, and the kind of confident presence that suggests challenging you would be more trouble than it's worth. The challenge comes from newer pigs who haven't yet learned the established feeding order, and occasionally from established pigs testing whether your claim to your position has weakened. Both situations require different responses. New pigs need education, firm but not aggressive correction, that teaches them how the system works without traumatizing them. Established pigs need reminders, clear signals that your position remains secure and that challenges will be met with appropriate resistance. You develop a repertoire of defensive techniques that range from subtle positioning adjustments to more obvious displays of territorial commitment. Sometimes a strategically timed arrival at the feeding trough is enough to remind everyone of your established rights. Other times you need to engage in the kind of diplomatic posturing that communicates serious intent without actually starting a fight you'd prefer to avoid. Understanding the complex politics of barn space allocation becomes crucial, as you realize that where pigs sleep affects everything from their social status to their access to optimal feeding positions. The barn operates on an invisible map of territories, pathways, and neutral zones that shift based on season, weather, and the ongoing relationships between its residents. Your responsibilities extend beyond just maintaining your own space. to understanding how your position affects the broader spatial dynamics. Where you choose to sleep influences traffic patterns, creates or blocks access to shared resources, and sends signals about your relationships with neighboring pigs. A poorly chosen sleeping spot can accidentally trigger territorial disputes or disrupt established social arrangements that have taken months to develop. You learn to read the subtle signs that indicate when spatial arrangements are working and when they need adjustment. Increased grumbling during morning routines suggests that someone's sleeping position is creating bottlenecks. Unusual feeding patterns might indicate that territorial boundaries have shifted in ways that affect access to the trough. Even changes in overall barn atmosphere can signal that the spatial politics need diplomatic attention. The burden of being one of the bigger pigs brings expectations that rise along with your weight and social standing. Other pigs look to you for leadership during minor crises, conflict resolution during disputes, and general decision-making about group activities. These expectations arrive without formal announcement or training. Suddenly, you're the pig that others turn to when problems need solving. Your first leadership test involves a situation where the water system malfunctions, creating both a shortage of drinking water and a potential mud-wallow crisis. The younger pigs panic with the enthusiasm of creatures who haven't yet developed confidence in their ability to survive minor inconveniences. The older pigs wait with the patience of those who've seen problems come and go, but lack the energy to take charge of solutions. This leaves you in the position of needing to organize a response despite having no formal authority and limited experience with water system management. Your solution involves both practical problem-solving, identifying alternative water sources, and organizing efficient access to them, and psychological management of a group of worried pigs who need reassurance that the situation is under control. Learning that leadership often just means being the first one to walk towards something scary becomes one of your most valuable insights about responsibility. Real leadership, you discover, isn't about having superior knowledge or natural authority. It's about being willing to move forward when everyone else is waiting for someone else to move first. This realization transforms your approach to challenges from wait and see what happens to investigate and develop solutions. When strange noises come from the equipment shed, you're the pig who goes to check what's happening instead of joining the group speculation about potential dangers. When new humans appear on the farm, you take the initiative to assess their threat level rather than waiting for someone else to conduct reconnaissance. Your willingness to take these first steps toward unknown situations earns you a reputation for reliability that comes with both benefits and burdens. Other pigs trust your judgment, which feels good, but they also expect you to exercise that judgment on their behalf, which creates pressure to make good decisions even when you're not sure what the right choice might be. The responsibilities accumulate gradually but persistently: territory defense, spatial management, group leadership, and initiative taking. Each success builds expectations for future performance, creating a cycle where competence leads to greater responsibility, which develops greater competence, which leads to even more responsibility. You find yourself occupying a role you never specifically sought, but somehow earned through the simple process of being willing to handle the tasks that other pigs preferred to avoid. It's not glamorous leadership, but it's real responsibility that makes a difference in the daily life of your farmyard community. The awakening of romantic interest in your life arrives with all the grace and subtlety of a freight train, driven by someone who learned to operate trains through trial and error. One day you're contentedly focused on mud quality and optimal feeding positions, and the next day you're noticing that some pigs are more aesthetically pleasing than others, which is both a revelation and a complication you weren't prepared to handle. Your first experience with pig attraction involves a particularly impressive pig whose confidence and mud-wallowing technique suggest competence in areas beyond just basic survival. You find yourself studying their approach to daily activities with what you tell yourself is academic interest in superior pig methodology, but which involves more staring than pure scientific observation typically requires. The realization that this heightened interest might constitute romantic feelings comes as something of a shock. You thought you understood the scope of pig concerns: food, comfort, territory, social standing. But apparently there's an entire category of pig experience that you've been overlooking. This discovery is like finding out there's a whole extra room in a house you thought you knew completely. Competition for romantic attention introduces you to social dynamics that make regular pig politics seem straightforward by comparison. The strategies involved are subtle, complex, and often counterproductive in ways that suggest evolution hasn't quite finished working out the optimal approach to pig courtship. Success requires balancing confidence with approachability, demonstrating competence without appearing to show off, and projecting attractiveness while maintaining the dignity that comes with being a serious, established pig. Your initial attempts at being impressive fall somewhere between endearing and disaster, which turns out to be a fairly typical range for pig romantic expression. You try showcasing your superior route-finding abilities, only to discover that extended dirt-digging demonstrations are less romantically compelling than you anticipated. Your attempt to display your weather prediction skills by confidently forecasting rain results in 3 days of unexpectedly clear skies that undermine your credibility as both meteorologist and potential romantic partner. The mud-wallowing exhibitions prove particularly challenging because optimal wallowing involves achieving maximum mud coverage, which conflicts with the goal of appearing attractive to potential partners. You experiment with strategic wallowing that maintains some visual appeal while still providing adequate cooling, but this requires a level of coordination between practical needs and aesthetic considerations that challenges your multitasking abilities. Competition with other pigs for romantic attention mostly involves being slightly less muddy than usual, which creates interesting problems when your daily routine depends on regular mud application for temperature regulation and skin protection. You attempt to time your social interactions for moments when you're at peak cleanliness, but pig social life doesn't operate on schedules convenient for maintaining optimal appearance levels. The efforts to appear charming while covered in your usual layer of protective mud lead to what can only be described as creative approaches to personal presentation. You experiment with selective mud application that emphasizes your better features while minimizing coverage of areas that might detract from your overall appeal. This results in distinctly non-optimal temperature regulation, but potentially improved romantic prospects, though measuring romantic success in pig society requires evaluation criteria you're still developing. Your discovery that charm is relative when everyone involved is a pig provides both relief and perspective on the romantic competition. The standards for pig attractiveness, it turns out, are quite achievable, provided you maintain reasonable hygiene, demonstrate basic competence in essential pig activities, and avoid behavior that suggests you might be unreliable during crisis situations or food shortages. The social aspects of pig romance prove more complex than the aesthetic considerations. Establishing romantic relationships requires navigating existing social hierarchies, territorial arrangements, and the opinions of other pigs who apparently consider themselves qualified to judge your romantic choices. Your interest in a particular pig needs approval not just from the pig in question, but from the broader farmyard community, which operates as an informal but influential review board for relationship decisions. The diplomatic challenges of courtship involve understanding not just what might appeal to your romantic target, but also how your romantic success might affect your standing with other pigs. Some romantic partnerships enhance social status through association with impressive partners. Others create complications when romantic choices conflict with established territorial arrangements or social alliances. Your romantic education includes learning that pig relationships operate on practical as well as emotional levels. Successful partnerships require compatible approaches to territory management, feeding schedules, and mud wallow sharing. Romantic compatibility needs to account for different preferences in daily routines, social interaction levels, and crisis response strategies. The process teaches you that romantic success in pig society depends less on dramatic gestures and more on consistent demonstration of the qualities that make for reliable long-term partnerships: competence, stability, and the kind of steady temperament that suggests you won't cause unnecessary drama in an environment where drama can complicate everyone's access to essential resources. Your romantic considerations ultimately become another aspect of finding your place in farmyard society, requiring the same combination of self-understanding and social awareness that characterizes all successful pig relationships. The difference is that romantic relationships involve higher stakes and more complex emotional territory, but the fundamental skills remain the same: understanding what others need, demonstrating your ability to provide it, and building trust through consistent, reliable behavior. The romantic landscape of pig society, while challenging, proves navigable through patience, genuine interest in potential partners as complete pigs rather than just romantic targets, and the willingness to accept that sometimes the best romantic strategy involves simply being the most authentic version of yourself while maintaining reasonable standards of cleanliness. Your relationship with the farmyard reaches what can only be described as complete environmental integration. You know every mud puddle like old friends, their seasonal personalities, their capacity for various activities, their recovery time after heavy use. The shallow depression near the apple tree becomes a reliable morning refresher. The deeper wallow by the oak provides serious afternoon cooling. The seasonal puddle that forms after spring rains offers temporary luxury before drying up in summer's heat. Each mud hole has its own character, its own optimal usage schedule, and its particular requirements for maintenance. You understand which ones need supplemental water during dry spells, which benefit from strategic stirring to maintain proper consistency, and which should be left alone to develop their own natural equilibrium. This knowledge represents years of research, conducted through daily experience and careful observation of how environmental changes affect mud quality. You've catalogued every loose board in every fence, like a security consultant conducting a comprehensive perimeter assessment. The board near the gatepost that shifts when pushed from the right angle. The bottom plank by the compost area that has enough give to create a small gap for root retrieval. The section near the barn that creaks in a way that suggests future loosening potential. This intelligence serves multiple purposes: escape planning, entertainment during boring afternoons, and the satisfaction of knowing your environment better than anyone else. Your fence knowledge extends beyond just structural weaknesses to understanding traffic patterns, maintenance schedules, and the behavioral implications of various fence sections. You know which areas humans check regularly and which ones remain unmonitored for days at a time. You understand where other animals habitually pass through and which sections serve as unofficial gathering areas for farmyard social activities. Weather patterns hold no surprises anymore because you've become essentially a living barometer capable of predicting atmospheric changes with accuracy that would impress meteorologists if they bothered to study pig forecasting methodology. Your internal weather station operates through a combination of joint sensitivity, atmospheric pressure awareness, and what might be described as accumulated environmental wisdom. You feel pressure changes 12 hours before storms arrive, experience temperature shift warnings through subtle changes in how your body feels during normal activities, and somehow sense seasonal transitions before they become obvious to less environmentally attuned creatures. This biological weather forecasting proves invaluable for daily planning, optimal wallowing schedules, feeding position strategy, and the timing of various outdoor activities. The farmyard ecosystem operates partly around your daily routine, which is both flattering and slightly concerning. Your morning territorial patrol coincides with optimal feeding preparation time, creating a schedule that other pigs have learned to coordinate with. Your afternoon wallowing session serves as an informal signal for general farmyard relaxation time. Your evening position-claiming ritual helps establish the social order for overnight barn arrangements. This central role in farmyard scheduling happened gradually, through the simple process of maintaining consistent patterns that other creatures found useful to reference. You didn't set out to become a scheduling anchor for farmyard society, but your reliable routines provide structure that apparently serves broader community needs. Other pigs plan their activities around your movements. Humans time their farmyard visits to coincide with your predictable locations, and even the chickens seem to coordinate their pecking schedules with your territorial rounds. The responsibility of being a temporal landmark for farmyard activities feels significant in ways you didn't expect. Your consistency matters, not just for your own organizational needs, but for the broader functioning of your community. When you deviate from normal patterns, sleeping late, changing wallow timing, or altering patrol routes, the ripple effects create minor disruptions throughout the farmyard social system. As evening settles over the pasture, painting the sky in colors that suggest tomorrow will bring good weather for outdoor activities, you find yourself contemplating the territorial achievements that define your adult pig life. Your domain isn't vast by objective standards, but it's perfectly sized for your needs and efficiently organized for optimal daily functioning. The satisfaction that comes from this territorial mastery extends beyond simple property pride to something approaching environmental harmony. You've created a living situation that maximizes comfort while minimizing conflict, provides security without isolation, and offers opportunities for both social interaction and private reflection. Your territory works because you understand it completely and have organized it according to principles that prioritize both practical efficiency and personal satisfaction. The sunset light catches the surface of your primary mud wallow, transforming ordinary farmyard mud into something that looks almost beautiful. The fence posts cast long shadows that create interesting patterns across familiar ground. The gentle sounds of other pigs settling into evening routines provide a soundtrack of contentment that suggests the entire farmyard community has achieved a level of stability and mutual accommodation that makes daily life genuinely pleasant. This environmental mastery represents more than just accumulated knowledge. It's evidence that you've successfully adapted to your circumstances rather than simply enduring them. You've moved beyond basic survival into genuine expertise, developing capabilities that make your life not just sustainable but actively satisfying. The farmyard isn't just where you happen to live, It's a carefully understood and well-managed environment that serves your needs, because you've invested the time and attention necessary to make it work optimally. You've achieved the kind of environmental integration that allows you to stop worrying about basic necessities and start focusing on the more subtle aspects of daily life that transform mere existence into something approaching genuine contentment. Younger pigs look to you for guidance with the kind of unwavering confidence that makes you question whether they understand that you're still figuring things out as you go along. Their faith in your wisdom is both touching and terrifying. They approach you with questions about everything, from optimal root digging techniques to the complex social protocols that govern feeding trough etiquette, apparently convinced that age and size automatically translate into comprehensive knowledge about all aspects of pig life. Your first major advisory consultation involves a dispute between two young pigs over territorial boundaries near the water source. They present their case with the seriousness of creatures who believe property law is both critically important and somehow within your area of expertise. You listen to both sides, ask what seem like relevant questions, and somehow manage to propose a solution that satisfies everyone involved without creating new problems. The success of this intervention establishes your reputation as the pig. Other pigs consult about important decisions, though the definition of important in pig society includes questions like, is this particular stick worth fighting over? And how long should one wait before approaching a mud wallow that appears to be temporarily unoccupied? These consultations require the kind of diplomatic skills you never knew you were developing, combined with the wisdom to recognize that seemingly trivial disputes can have significant social implications. You've become the go-to authority for assessments of whether various food items are worth competitive effort. This responsibility requires evaluating not just the quality of the food in question, but the broader social dynamics involved in pursuing it. Sometimes a particularly appealing apple isn't worth the conflict it would generate. Other times, failing to compete for clearly superior food sends signals about your status that could affect future access to resources. These food-related decisions involve complex calculations about energy expenditure versus nutritional benefit, social cost versus immediate satisfaction, and the long-term implications of various competitive strategies. Your recommendations carry weight because other pigs trust your judgment, but they also create responsibility for outcomes that might affect multiple pigs' daily experiences. The weight of being considered wise becomes particularly apparent when you catch yourself genuinely excited about a stick with an interesting shape or particularly satisfying texture. The disconnect between your internal experience, still finding simple objects fascinating for reasons you can't articulate, and your external reputation as a source of farmyard wisdom creates cognitive dissonance that's both amusing and slightly uncomfortable. You're simultaneously the pig who gets consulted about complex social issues and the pig who spent 20 minutes yesterday investigating a leaf that moved in an interesting way. The younger pigs who seek your advice don't seem to notice this contradiction, which suggests either that wisdom and curiosity about random objects aren't mutually exclusive, or that they have lower standards for what constitutes reliable guidance than you might prefer. Conflict resolution becomes one of your primary leadership functions, though your methodology relies heavily on strategic grunting, combined with occasional gentle shoving, rather than any formal training in dispute mediation. Most pig conflicts involve territorial misunderstandings, resource competition, or social hierarchy clarification, problems that respond well to patient listening, followed by common-sense suggestions delivered with appropriate authority. Your approach to conflict resolution emphasizes de-escalation through redirection rather than victory through dominance. When two pigs argue about wallow access, you help them develop time-sharing arrangements. When feeding disputes arise, you suggest positioning strategies that minimize direct competition. When social hierarchy tensions create problems, you facilitate face-saving solutions that allow all parties to maintain dignity while clarifying boundaries. The success of these interventions depends partly on your reputation for fairness, and partly on other pigs' recognition that your advice generally leads to outcomes that improve rather than complicate their daily lives. You're not trying to accumulate power through conflict resolution. You're trying to maintain farmyard harmony because discord makes everyone's life more difficult. Your leadership style develops around the principle that most problems have practical solutions if everyone involved is willing to prioritize collective well-being over individual pride. This approach works in pig society because most disputes arise from genuine conflicts of interest, rather than fundamental incompatibilities between personalities. The terrifying responsibility of leadership becomes manageable when you recognize that good judgment matters more than comprehensive knowledge, and that admitting uncertainty when you don't know something enhances rather than undermines your credibility. The younger pigs don't need you to have all the answers. They need you to help them think through problems systematically and consider consequences they might not have anticipated. Your leadership role crystallizes around being the pig who can be trusted to consider the broader implications of decisions, to remain calm during minor crises, and to prioritize community stability over personal advantage. It's not glamorous leadership, but it's the kind of steady, reliable guidance that makes daily life work better for everyone involved. You are, objectively speaking, an impressive pig by any reasonable pig standard, which is simultaneously a significant achievement and a somewhat limited accomplishment given the scope of pig-related ambitions. Your physical development has reached what can only be described as optimal pig configuration, the ideal intersection of size, strength, and functionality that represents peak performance within the specific constraints of pig existence. Your dimensions suggest competence without excess, strength without unwieldiness, and presence without taking up unreasonable amounts of shared space. You've achieved the pig equivalent of perfect proportions, though this distinction impresses mainly other pigs, and possibly humans, who have developed opinions about what constitutes good pig architecture. The broader world remains largely indifferent to your physical achievements, but within the context of farmyard society, you represent something approaching the ideal of pig development. Strength becomes apparent in daily activities that previously required effort but now feel routine. Moving rocks for optimal wallow construction happens with ease that surprises you. Territorial assertions that once demanded your full physical commitment now require only casual application of force. Even simple tasks like opening stubborn latches or repositioning fence boards benefit from strength that arrived gradually, but now feels like a natural extension of your intentions. Your size provides advantages beyond just physical capability. It conveys authority that makes leadership easier, creates presence that enhances territorial security, and projects the kind of stability that other pigs find reassuring during uncertain situations. You occupy space with confidence, move through farmyard terrain with authority, and generally present yourself as a pig who belongs wherever you happen to be. But perhaps most importantly, you possess the ability to move surprisingly quickly when motivated, which proves valuable for both opportunities and crisis response. When apples fall unexpectedly, you can reach them before other pigs fully process what's happening. When territorial challenges arise, you can position yourself advantageously before conflicts escalate. When interesting developments occur in distant parts of the farmyard, you can investigate while the situation is still developing rather than arriving after conclusions have been reached. This combination of size and speed creates what might be called optimal pig versatility. You're large enough to command respect, but agile enough to take advantage of opportunities that require quick response. You can engage in serious territorial defense when necessary, but you can also pursue delicate operations that require precision and timing rather than just overwhelming force. The confidence that comes with knowing exactly how pig-shaped you're supposed to be transforms your relationship with daily activities. From careful navigation of physical limitations to effortless execution of pig-related tasks, you understand your capabilities completely, recognize your limitations accurately, and operate within those parameters with the efficiency that comes from perfect calibration between intentions and physical reality. Your body feels like precision equipment designed specifically for pig activities, rather than a collection of parts you're still learning to coordinate effectively. Movement becomes intuitive, strength application feels natural, and physical problem-solving happens automatically, rather than requiring conscious calculation of what your body can and cannot accomplish. This physical confidence extends beyond just practical capabilities to affect your overall approach to farmyard challenges. Problems that once seemed daunting now appear manageable, because you trust your ability to execute whatever solutions you develop. Your physical competence provides a foundation of security that allows you to focus mental energy on strategy and social dynamics, rather than worrying about whether your body can handle the physical demands of daily pig life. You're basically the pig equivalent of being in your prime, which is like being the best possible version of something no one aspires to be. This represents both the achievement and the limitation of pig success. You've reached the pinnacle of pig development, mastered all the skills that pig life requires, and achieved recognition as an exemplary pig within a context that the broader world considers fundamentally unambitious. But within the farmyard community that constitutes your entire social universe, peak physical condition represents genuine accomplishment that enhances daily life quality, provides security during challenging situations, and creates opportunities for contributions that benefit the entire pig community. Your physical prime enables the kind of competent, reliable performance that makes you valuable to others and satisfying to yourself. Spring preparation becomes an elaborate ritual of territorial cleaning and general pig homesteading that rivals the organizational complexity of human seasonal transitions. You approach the warming weather with systematic attention to infrastructure maintenance, resource assessment, and strategic planning that would impress agricultural consultants if they bothered to study pig land management techniques. Your spring cleaning involves comprehensive wallow renovation, draining stagnant winter water, removing accumulated debris, and restoring optimal mud consistency through careful soil amendment and moisture management. Each wallow receives individual attention based on its specific winter damage and intended seasonal usage. The primary cooling wallow gets priority restoration because summer heat requires reliable temperature management. Secondary wallows receive maintenance based on their strategic importance and frequency of use. Territory cleaning extends beyond just mud management to include pathway maintenance, boundary clarification, and general environmental optimization. You clear winter debris from frequently traveled routes, reinforce territorial markers that may have shifted during freeze-thaw cycles, and assess whether any seasonal adjustments to territorial boundaries would improve efficiency or security. The homesteading aspects of spring preparation involve stockpiling resources, improving infrastructure, and establishing systems for optimal seasonal operation. You identify and prepare backup mud sources for drought contingencies, establish relationships with humans whose spring activities might generate interesting food opportunities, and coordinate with other pigs about shared resource management during the upcoming abundant season. Summer optimization requires finding the perfect balance of shade and mud access, which becomes increasingly critical as temperatures rise beyond the comfortable range that allows for casual environmental management. Your summer strategy involves careful scheduling of activities around temperature patterns, strategic positioning to maximize cooling opportunities, and resource management that accounts for increased water consumption and more frequent mud applications. The shade management component of summer optimization involves understanding which areas provide relief at different times of day, how various shade sources change with sun angles throughout the season, and which locations offer cooling benefits without sacrificing access to food, water, or social interaction opportunities. You develop a sophisticated map of optimal positions for different times and weather conditions. Mud access during summer requires more complex planning because heat increases both your need for cooling and the rate at which mud wallows dry out or become less effective. You establish rotation schedules for multiple wallows, develop techniques for maintaining optimal mud consistency during hot weather, and create backup systems for cooling when primary wallows become temporarily unavailable. Autumn abundance represents the glory days of fallen fruit and nut season, requiring harvest strategy that balances immediate consumption with resource conservation for leaner periods. Your autumn approach involves territory expansion to include optimal foraging areas, development of techniques for processing different types of seasonal foods, and social coordination to minimize conflicts over premium harvest opportunities. The apple strategy alone requires sophisticated planning around tree productivity cycles, optimal ripeness timing, and competition management with other pigs who share your appreciation for seasonal fruit abundance. You learn to predict peak dropping periods, identify which trees produce the best fruit, and develop harvesting techniques that maximize your access to premium apples, while maintaining good relationships with other pigs who share the same territories. Nut season introduces different challenges involving ground-level foraging, shell processing, and storage considerations for foods that keep longer than fresh fruit. Your autumn expertise includes distinguishing between different nut varieties, understanding optimal collection timing, and developing efficient processing techniques that maximize nutritional extraction while minimizing energy expenditure. Winter survival transforms into an art form focused on staying warm through strategic positioning and group dynamics that require both individual preparation and collective coordination. Your winter mastery involves personal resource management, combined with social strategy that ensures community survival during the least hospitable season. The strategic positioning component of winter survival includes understanding microclimates within barn and shelter areas, identifying locations that provide optimal heat retention, and developing techniques for maintaining body warmth during extreme cold periods. You become expert at finding and creating warm spaces that provide both physical comfort and security. Group dynamics during winter require diplomatic skills that balance personal comfort needs with collective survival requirements. Shared warmth involves spatial negotiations that affect everyone's comfort level, resource sharing that ensures no individual pig faces survival challenges alone, and social coordination that maintains community harmony during stressful conditions. Your seasonal mastery represents the culmination of years spent learning to work with natural cycles rather than simply enduring them. You've developed strategies that don't just help you survive seasonal changes, but actually optimize each season's opportunities while minimizing its challenges. This expertise allows you to approach each seasonal transition with confidence, rather than anxiety, treating changing conditions as familiar challenges with known solutions, rather than unpredictable threats to your security and comfort. Passing on pig wisdom to the next generation becomes one of your most significant contributions to farmyard society, though the process proves more complex and occasionally frustrating than you anticipated when you first achieved the status of experienced pig. Your teaching involves not just sharing practical knowledge but helping younger pigs develop the judgment necessary to apply that knowledge appropriately in varying circumstances. Your curriculum covers essential skills that every pig needs for successful farmyard living: optimal foraging techniques, mud-wallow management, weather prediction through biological indicators, territorial establishment and maintenance, social navigation strategies, and the subtle art of human interaction. But teaching these skills requires more than just demonstration. It involves helping younger pigs understand why certain approaches work better than others and how to adapt techniques to their individual circumstances. The foraging education proves particularly challenging because effective food discovery depends partly on technique and partly on developing the kind of environmental awareness that only comes through extensive practice. You can show young pigs how to identify promising route locations, but they need to develop their own sensitivity to soil conditions, moisture patterns, and the subtle signs that indicate underground food sources. Your teaching method involves guided practice sessions, where you demonstrate techniques while allowing younger pigs to experiment with their own approaches. This hands-on education helps them understand not just what to do but how to recognize when they're doing it correctly. The feedback loop of instruction, practice, and results creates learning experiences that stick better than simple demonstration or explanation alone. The responsibility of being the pig others turn to for advice extends beyond just teaching practical skills to providing guidance about decision-making, risk assessment, and the complex social calculations that affect daily life in pig society. Younger pigs seek your input on everything from territorial disputes to romantic strategy, apparently convinced that your experience qualifies you to provide expertise on all aspects of pig existence. Your advisory role requires developing the ability to ask useful questions rather than just providing answers. When a young pig asks about handling territorial challenges, you help them think through the specific circumstances they're facing rather than offering generic solutions that might not apply to their situation. This approach teaches problem-solving skills along with specific tactical knowledge. The wisdom you share increasingly focuses on strategic thinking rather than just tactical execution. Young pigs need to learn not just how to accomplish specific tasks, but how to evaluate whether those tasks are worth accomplishing, how to prioritize competing demands on their time and energy, and how to anticipate the broader consequences of their decisions. Learning that wisdom mostly consists of knowing which humans are worth approaching becomes one of your most valuable teaching contributions. Human interaction offers both opportunities and risks that require careful assessment of individual human personalities, timing considerations, and the specific circumstances that make approaches more or less likely to succeed. Your human assessment curriculum teaches young pigs to read human body language, understand human daily schedules and mood patterns, and recognize which humans respond positively to pig attention versus those who prefer to minimize interaction. This knowledge can mean the difference between occasional treats and unpleasant encounters that create lasting negative associations. The teaching process provides its own education, as you discover that explaining concepts forces you to understand them more clearly yourself. When you try to teach a young pig about optimal mud consistency, you have to articulate principles that you've been applying intuitively but never examined systematically. This reflection deepens your own expertise while making your knowledge more transferable to others. Your teaching moments extend beyond formal instruction to include modeling behavior that demonstrates how experienced pigs handle various situations. Young pigs learn as much from observing your responses to challenges as they do from your explicit advice. Your consistent demonstration of calm problem-solving, strategic thinking, and community-minded decision-making provides examples that influence their development even when they're not consciously seeking instruction. The cycle of pig generations becomes apparent as you watch young pigs gradually develop from confused newcomers into competent adults who will eventually take their own turns as teachers and advisors. Your place in this ongoing cycle involves serving as a bridge between the wisdom of previous generations and the needs of future ones, passing along accumulated knowledge while adapting it to current circumstances. This generational perspective provides a sense of continuity and purpose that extends beyond your individual pig experience. You're contributing to the collective wisdom of pig society, helping ensure that each new generation benefits from the accumulated learning of those who came before while developing their own innovations and improvements. The reflective nature of teaching creates moments of contemplation about your role in the broader farmyard community and your contributions to the ongoing story of pig life in this particular environment. You're not just surviving and thriving as an individual pig, you're participating in the cultural transmission that makes pig society more than just a collection of individual animals sharing space. Your daily patterns have evolved into something approaching sacred ritual, with each activity timed to perfection through years of optimization and adjustment. The morning territorial patrol happens at exactly the right moment to assess overnight developments, while avoiding the chaos of younger pigs who haven't yet learned the value of systematic routine. Your feeding approach occurs when the optimal balance of hunger and food availability creates maximum satisfaction with minimum competitive stress. The timing feels less like schedule adherence and more like natural rhythm, as if you finally synchronized your internal clock with the fundamental patterns that govern farmyard life. You arrive at the feeding trough precisely when the best food becomes available. Approach your mud wallow exactly when temperature and consistency reach optimal levels and position yourself for afternoon napping, just as the sun creates perfect warmth without uncomfortable glare. This temporal precision didn't happen overnight but developed through countless small adjustments based on experience, observation, and the gradual recognition that timing affects the quality of every pig activity. Early feeding means dealing with competitive chaos and suboptimal food distribution. Late feeding results in reduced selection and increased social tension. But feeding at exactly the right moment provides access to the best options with minimal stress and maximum satisfaction. Your mud routine demonstrates similar optimization. Morning wallowing happens after the mud has warmed slightly but before other pigs have disturbed optimal consistency. Afternoon mud applications coincide with peak heat while avoiding the evening rush when every pig decides simultaneously that cooling is necessary. Evening mud maintenance occurs during the peaceful transition period, when most activities wind down and social pressures decrease. The napping schedule reflects both practical energy management and strategic social positioning. You've identified the optimal rest periods that provide genuine relaxation while maintaining awareness of important farmyard developments. Your chosen napping locations offer comfort, security, and the ability to monitor situations that might require your attention or intervention. Other animals have begun working around your schedule, recognizing that your routine provides reliable reference points for organizing their own activities. The chickens time their foraging expeditions to avoid conflicts with your territorial rounds. Younger pigs plan their feeding approaches around your established trough positions. Even the humans seem to schedule certain farmyard activities around your predictable locations and timing patterns. This temporal influence happened gradually, through the simple process of maintaining consistency that others found useful to coordinate with. You didn't set out to become a scheduling anchor for farmyard society, but your reliable patterns create stability that apparently serves broader community needs. Your routine provides structure that makes everyone's daily planning more efficient and predictable. The responsibility of being a temporal landmark carries unexpected weight. When you deviate from established patterns, sleeping late, changing feeding timing, or skipping routine activities, the ripple effects create minor disruptions throughout the farmyard social system. Other creatures have calibrated their expectations around your consistency, making your schedule changes more noticeable and socially significant than you anticipated. You realize you've become the pig equivalent of a grumpy neighbor whose predictable behavior provides oddly comforting structure for the entire community. Your routine isn't just personal organization anymore. It's a service that helps other creatures navigate their own daily challenges by providing reliable reference points for timing and resource access. The gentle self-awareness that comes with this recognition brings both amusement and mild concern. You've achieved the kind of establishment respectability that transforms individual preference into community institution. Your schedule matters to others, your presence provides stability, and your consistency creates expectations that extend beyond your personal convenience. This evolution from flexible pig to scheduled institution represents both achievement and limitation. You've mastered the art of optimal routine to such a degree that changing it would disrupt not just your own comfort, but the broader farmyard ecosystem that has adapted to your patterns. Your success in creating perfect daily rhythms has made you somewhat responsible for maintaining them. The satisfaction of routine mastery outweighs the constraints it creates. You've discovered that the perfect balance of meals, mud, and naps produces daily contentment that makes each day feel successful regardless of larger accomplishments. Your routine provides both personal satisfaction and community service, creating value that extends beyond your individual pig experience. Teaching the next generation transforms from sharing knowledge to preventing disasters, which requires a fundamentally different approach than your earlier educational efforts. Where once you focused on demonstrating techniques and explaining principles, now you find yourself primarily engaged in damage control and crisis prevention, trying to minimize the consequences of poor decisions you can see coming but somehow cannot prevent. The patience required to watch young pigs make the same mistakes you made becomes your greatest developmental challenge. You observe them approaching situations where your experience could save them significant discomfort, but your attempts to share relevant wisdom meet with the kind of polite dismissal, usually reserved for advice from elderly relatives who clearly don't understand modern circumstances. Your warnings about electric fence investigation are met with nodding agreement, followed by immediate fence testing. Your guidance about optimal mud consistency evaluation gets acknowledged respectfully and then completely ignored in favor of experimental approaches that you know will result in either inadequate cooling or complete submersion, requiring rescue operations. Your advice about territorial dispute management receives serious consideration that lasts exactly until the first actual territorial challenge arises. The educational process becomes less about imparting wisdom and more about positioning yourself to provide assistance when inevitable consequences arrive. You learn to recognize the signs that indicate when young pigs are about to engage in activities that will require intervention, emergency guidance, or simple physical rescue from situations they've created through enthusiastic inexperience. Pride mixed with exasperation characterizes your emotional response to these recurring educational cycles. Pride because your predictions about consequences prove accurate with depressing consistency. Exasperation because the accuracy of your forecasts doesn't seem to influence future decision-making by pigs, who apparently need to learn everything through direct experience rather than benefiting from accumulated wisdom. The strange satisfaction of being right about things no one wanted to hear provides compensation for the frustration of watching preventable problems unfold according to your predictions. When you warn a young pig that their territorial expansion strategy will create conflicts with established pigs, and subsequent events prove your assessment correct, you experience vindication that feels both satisfying and melancholy. This vindication carries complex emotional undertones, because being right about impending problems means watching others experience difficulties you could have helped them avoid. Your expertise in predicting pig-related consequences comes from your own history of similar mistakes, creating a cycle where wisdom develops through suffering that apparently cannot be transferred, but must be earned individually. Your teaching methodology adapts to focus on minimizing damage rather than preventing mistakes. You provide guidance about how to recover from poor decisions rather than how to avoid making them. You offer techniques for extracting oneself from problematic situations rather than strategies for recognizing when situations should be avoided entirely. The most effective educational interventions involve teaching recovery skills that become useful when prevention fails. Young pigs need to know how to extricate themselves from mud wallows that prove deeper than anticipated, how to repair territorial relationships damaged by overly aggressive boundary establishment, and how to recover social standing after public demonstrations of poor judgment. Your role evolves from teacher to safety net, providing backup support that allows young pigs to learn through experience while ensuring that their educational experiences don't result in permanent damage to their health, social standing, or territorial security. You become the pig equivalent of training wheels, present but unobtrusive, supportive but not restrictive. The development of young pigs under your guidance follows predictable patterns that mirror your own historical progression from enthusiastic incompetence to cautious expertise. They begin with confidence that exceeds their capabilities, proceed through a series of educational disasters that gradually calibrate their self-assessment, and eventually develop the kind of measured approach to challenges that characterizes experienced pig behavior. Your mentoring success gets measured not by how quickly young pigs learn to follow your advice, but by how effectively they develop their own judgment and problem-solving capabilities. The goal isn't to create pigs who think like you, but to help them develop thinking skills that will serve them throughout their pig careers. The generational transmission of pig wisdom involves more than just passing along specific techniques or factual knowledge. You're helping young pigs develop the mental frameworks they'll need to navigate unfamiliar situations, assess risks accurately, and make decisions that balance immediate desires against long-term consequences. The teaching process provides its own educational benefits, as you discover that explaining concepts to others clarifies your own understanding and reveals aspects of pig wisdom that you've been applying intuitively without conscious analysis. Your mentoring responsibilities force you to examine your own decision-making processes and articulate the principles that guide your choices. The recursive nature of learning through teaching creates a cycle where your educational efforts enhance your own expertise while contributing to the development of future pig generations. You're simultaneously student and teacher, learning more about effective pig strategies while sharing accumulated wisdom with pigs who will eventually face their own mentoring responsibilities. The long-term perspective that comes with multiple cycles of pig education helps you understand that resistance to advice and preference for experiential learning aren't personal rejections of your wisdom, but necessary aspects of individual development that cannot be bypassed through instruction alone. Young pigs need to make their own mistakes not because they're stubborn, but because certain types of learning require personal experience to become meaningful and applicable. Your body begins sending memos about limitations you didn't know existed, delivered through a communication system that operates entirely through subtle discomfort and reduced enthusiasm for activities that previously felt effortless. These messages arrive with the persistence of someone trying to get your attention about important information you've been ignoring, except the someone is your own physical infrastructure, and the information involves operational constraints you never had to consider before. Joints start providing weather commentary with the reliability of professional meteorologists, offering advance warning about atmospheric pressure changes through varying degrees of stiffness and minor aches that predict rain, temperature shifts, and seasonal transitions. Your left front leg becomes particularly eloquent about upcoming weather systems, delivering forecasts through morning stiffness that correlates remarkably well with conditions that arrive 12 to 24 hours later. This biological weather station proves more accurate than visual sky assessment for predicting immediate forecast changes, though the information arrives in a format that requires interpretation rather than direct translation. A general achiness suggests significant weather system approaches. Specific joint discomfort indicates temperature change, direction, and intensity. The particular way your right hip feels when you first stand up provides surprisingly detailed information about wind patterns and precipitation probability. The gradual acceptance that you can't eat quite everything anymore represents one of your most significant lifestyle adjustments. Foods that once posed no digestive challenges now require consideration of their potential consequences, timing of consumption, and compatibility with other dietary choices. Your stomach develops what can only be described as opinions about optimal food combinations and consumption scheduling. Certain foods that previously fell into the category of obviously edible migrate to proceed with caution or even probably not worth the consequences. Rich foods require moderation rather than enthusiastic consumption. Unfamiliar items need more careful evaluation before wholesale ingestion. Even familiar foods sometimes disagree with you in ways that suggest your digestive system has developed more sophisticated standards for acceptable cuisine. Energy conservation evolves from laziness into strategy, as you recognize that managing your daily energy expenditure allows for optimal performance when energy is most needed. Activities that once seemed essential reveal themselves as optional when evaluated against the cost of fatigue that affects your ability to handle truly important tasks. The strategic approach to energy management involves prioritizing activities based on their necessity, timing them to coincide with your peak energy periods, and eliminating or reducing efforts that provide minimal benefit relative to their energy cost. This isn't about becoming inactive, but about becoming more intentional about how you deploy your physical resources. Morning activities get scheduled during your highest energy period. Afternoon tasks are planned around your natural energy dip. Evening activities are limited to those that require minimal physical effort, but provide significant satisfaction or social benefit. This energy budgeting allows you to maintain overall activity levels while accommodating physical changes that affect your stamina and recovery time. The acceptance of physical limitations brings unexpected relief from the pressure to maintain peak performance in all areas simultaneously. You can focus your energy on activities that matter most, while reducing effort in areas where good enough proves sufficient. This selective optimization allows you to excel in chosen areas, rather than struggling to maintain universal competence. Your health awareness represents practical wisdom about working with your body's changing capabilities, rather than fighting against them. creating a sustainable approach to daily life that maintains quality and satisfaction while accommodating the realities of physical aging. More time gets spent watching rather than doing, which initially feels like reduced engagement with farmyard life, but gradually reveals itself as a different and equally valuable form of participation. Your observation skills develop depth and nuance that active involvement sometimes prevented, allowing you to notice patterns, appreciate subtleties, and understand connections that escaped your attention during busier periods of life. The pleasure of perfect mud consistency, achieved through years of research and experimentation, represents one of your most reliable sources of daily satisfaction. You've discovered the precise combination of soil composition, moisture content, and temperature that creates optimal wallowing conditions, and you can now achieve this perfection consistently rather than accidentally. Your mud expertise extends beyond just personal application to understanding how different weather conditions affect mud quality, how various soil types respond to moisture addition, and how timing influences the development of optimal consistency. This knowledge allows you to predict when natural conditions will produce excellent wallowing opportunities and when intervention will be necessary to maintain acceptable mud standards. The process of creating perfect mud becomes almost meditative, a careful balance of observation, adjustment, and patience that produces results, satisfying both practically and aesthetically. You appreciate the texture, temperature, and coverage properties of well-prepared mud with the discrimination of someone who has devoted considerable time to understanding the subtle variables that separate adequate mud from excellent mud. Seasonal changes gain new depth of meaning when observed with the accumulated experience of multiple cycles. You notice details in autumn leaf color progression, spring growth patterns, and winter weather transitions that reveal the complexity and beauty of natural systems, operating on timescales much larger than daily pig concerns. Your appreciation of seasonal variation extends beyond food and comfort to embrace the beauty of light, sound, and atmosphere. Each shift in weather becomes a reminder of your place within larger natural cycles. Mud wallows, foraging, and territorial upkeep no longer feel like isolated acts, but contributions to an interconnected ecosystem where every creature shares space and purpose. This ecological awareness deepens rather than diminishes your daily routines. What once seemed mundane now carries meaning, as you find peace in repetition and the small satisfactions of competence. Feeding, wallowing, and social interaction evolve into quiet arts, refined over time into practices that embody both utility and dignity. Routine becomes not limitation but a structure for contentment. With age, you discover that happiness lies less in extraordinary feats and more in performing ordinary tasks with care and attention. Younger pigs now approach you with questions, whether out of respect or practicality, convinced your long survival has value. Without seeking it, you've become a landmark in the farmyard, your consistency granting authority in a world of seasonal change. This role brings responsibility, to provide context, to explain traditions, and to tell stories of earlier times. Your tales blend memory with interpretation, shaping not just history but lessons for future generations. Teaching comes mostly through example, as your steady movements and efficient habits show younger pigs how to live well without wasted effort. The ambitions of youth give way to a quieter mastery, where comfort, timing, and deliberate action matter more than restless adventure. Daily life centers on small pleasures, the perfect mud consistency, the right patch of sun, the predictability of meals. These modest achievements bring more lasting satisfaction than the dramatic pursuits you once imagined. Watching new generations stumble through familiar mistakes, you feel patient amusement, knowing some truths can only be learned firsthand. Your legacy rests not in grand achievements, but in practical wisdom, worn paths, and reliable wallows. These traces of your presence continue shaping farmyard life, teaching by example long after you're gone. In this way, your chapter fits into the broader story of growth, renewal, and continuity. Success, measured in pig terms, lies in survival, comfort, and contribution. And by these standards, you have lived well. As sunset paints the farmyard, you rest content, knowing your life, ordinary yet refined, fulfilled the true measures of pig existence.